Everybody, my name is Lizzy Bowden. I am the Adult Services Manager at the North Riverside Public Library, and I am coming to you for this week's Talented Tuesday to show you how to do really basic cross stitch. So during Talented Tuesday, while we're at home, our staff is hard at work still bringing library programs and content to you. But we are also, I think, all spending a little bit of time brushing up on new skills and trying to be really creative and trying to teach ourselves new things. And so we thought that it might be fun to share some of those new things we're trying to do with the patrons and anybody interested from the North Riverside area and surrounding areas as well. So like I said, I'm going to teach you today how to do cross stitch. This is going to be a pretty basic tutorial for cross stitch. I'm not going to go into any of the more complicated things that you can do. This is definitely for beginners. So if you are an expert cross stitcher, please feel free to stick around and let me know if I forgot to say anything, because I would really appreciate that. All right, so when it comes to cross stitch, there are certain supplies that you will need to have. Now, if you don't already have these, you will have trouble doing cross stitch, but you can buy them online. They're all available probably through Michael's, Hobby Lobby, Amazon, and other craft websites. So here are the things that you're going to need. First, there is a certain type of cloth called Aida cloth, and this is the most famous kind of cloth used for cross stitch. And here's a piece of it that I already cut. So you'll cut your cloth into whatever size fits the embroidery hoop you're using, and you can see the cloth comes with little holes already in it for the cross stitch. So that's the first thing you're going to need. You can buy Aida cloth in a lot of different sizes. This particular one is 14 count, which means, I looked this up before doing this video, 14 count means that there's 14 strands of thread per inch. Most designs that you get will tell you what size cloth is appropriate. So you can just take a look at the pattern that you get and see what they say. But as a general rule, you want to look for one where the holes in the fabric aren't too big. So 14 count is the size I have, and that's the most common size that I see for on patterns. The next thing that you're going to need is an embroidery hoop. And I like to use the wood ones, but they do make them in plastic as well. And they come in two pieces. And what you'll actually do is you'll put the fabric between the two pieces so that it holds it steady as you work. And these come in all different sizes. And most of the time when you buy an embroidery pattern or cross stitch pattern, they will tell you what size hoop that you want to get as well. So that's very handy. The next thing that you're going to want to have is a needle. And I pre-threaded my needle because I didn't want to try and do that on camera because I knew it wasn't going to go well. Now, the size needle that you want depends on the size of Aida cloth that you have as well. So if you have a 14 count Aida cloth, then you will want a specific needle size for that. I think 24 is the size needle you want, but this is all Googleable. So if you get a different size Aida cloth, you can look and see what size needle you want. And that's really just so that it'll easily fit into the holes when you're cross stitching with room for your thread, because you might go through the same hole multiple times, or different corners of the same hole multiple times. All right, so that's your needle. The next thing that you're going to want is thread. And the most famous brand of thread is DMC. They make so many different colors, and most cross stitch patterns will refer to the color that they want you to use. You're not ever required to use certain colors, but if you want to replicate the pattern exactly, they will refer to the DMC thread by a number. So this particular DMC thread is number 977, and it is kind of this orangey color. So your pattern will tell you what colors that you should get for it, and usually there'll be some sort of key for like what on the pattern, what color should go where. And then that brings me to, of course, the next step, which is the pattern. So what I have today, we are not going to do this whole thing because this could take a couple hours, but I have this little mouse. I made this a few years back, actually, for my sister, who really likes, well, really she likes rats, but this is, actually, it's got a really long tail. It's either a rat or a mouse. So your pattern is generally going to look like this. I'm going to bring it up close to the camera if I can do this the right way. And you'll see, so where the X's are, that refers to a specific type of stitch. and kind of where you need to be stitching. Then, like, as far as, this is kind of hard to see because it printed really, really lightly, but I don't know if this is actually legible to you guys, but this is gonna, it says the materials you'll need are 7x7 AIDA 14 count fabric, an embroidery needle of what size, for 24 inch, not inch, 24 size embroidery needle. And then it will say that it needs a 5-inch embroidery hoop for framing. So it gives you all of that information. Now I do have a more complicated pattern that I'm actually currently working on. And this one, the mouse pattern, you can use any color, they don't specify. But I'm also working on a pattern right now that does. And you can kind of see here how it looks. So for each color, there's a symbol, and it tells you the DMC number that you should buy and how many strands that you should use of it when you are stitching. So, that's all going to be information that's provided to you. Now, you might be wondering, where do you get your patterns? So I often have bought patterns on Etsy. That's a really, really great place to go to find them. But you can also find patterns for free on a lot of different websites that are just kind of available to you, especially the more simple patterns. You're likely to be able to find free flowers and things like that. And actually, currently, DMC's website has a lot of free patterns that are available to you. So if you want to start this, you can go to DMC's website and download a free pattern, and that'll get you going. I think that cross stitch is a really nice thing to do right now, particularly like if you're watching TV or you're listening to a podcast and you just sort of want to do something with your hands and you kind of want to turn your brain off. It's a really great activity for that because you're really accomplishing something. It's something you can do fairly mindlessly, although you do have to count, so you do have to be paying some attention to the stitches as you do them. But it's just a really great way to spend the time and actually be accomplishing something while you're still kind of turning your brain off a little bit. So I've been enjoying doing it a lot right now. All right, so here is how to physically do it. So the first thing you will do when doing cross stitch is you're going to take your Aida cloth and you're going to cut it to whatever size you need, that it's going to fit into your hoop. And also you really need to make sure that you leave some room outside your hoop, because when you are done, you may want to frame it. Either you can take it out and actually put it in a frame, or you can actually frame it inside the hoop. So you need to be leaving some extra room on either side. I probably didn't leave quite enough room on these two sides, but I did leave plenty here, so that's good. So you can also kind of see that I've already done this sort of black cross through the middle of the fabric. And the reason for that is because usually when you get a cross stitch pattern, you need to start somewhere. You're counting stitches, and you need to know where you're counting from. So you can see on this mouse, the red lines, those are going to correspond to whatever lines you put through the fabric. And they're going to tell you where to start, so that I know when I see these red lines, if the bottom right X is going to be in this little corner right here. And so I know that's, that little corner right there. Oh my gosh, there. I know that's where I'm going to start stitching, and that's where I'm going to start counting from. And every other stitch I make will go off those first stitches I do. And so when you're counting, that's kind of how you can keep track. So in order to place these kind of in these lines in the center of your fabric, you're going to take whatever piece of fabric you cut, and you're just going to fold it in fours like this. You can see how easily this folds into fours because I did it already. But you're going to fold it in fours just like this. And when you unfold it, it's going to leave a crease behind. So you can't see that very well right now because of the thread that I already put in, but it'll leave a crease behind. And then you're really just going to take your needle with the thread in it, and you're just going to place those lines, just kind of, it doesn't even matter where you go under and how many little squares there are per line. You just want to get the line straight. And, as long as you make sure that it's straight going vertical and horizontal, that's what matters, and that it's in the center or as close to the center as you can get of your fabric that you've chosen. So once you've done that, that's your first step, and then you actually get to place the fabric into the embroidery hoop. So you take the embroidery hoop apart and you take the smaller piece that doesn't have the little closing clasp, and you put that in the bottom of your fabric. So it's going to fit in pretty easily right now because I had done this already, so there's a groove there. But generally, if your fabric was straight, you would just take it and place it over the circle and make sure that you're getting it as centered as you possibly can. And then all you do is you take the top of it, and like I'm going to try and do this so you guys can see, and then you just like put the top over the fabric so that you'll have this circle on one side and this circle on the other side, and that holds the fabric really tightly. And it also allows you to sort of pull the fabric really tightly. So I kind of just will make my way around the circle, pulling it so it's really, really, really taut. You want it to be super taut for stitching. And then you just close the clasp so that there is no give, basically, so that as you stitch, you're not going to get any extra fabric coming on either side. So it's going to stay taut the whole time. So you close it as tightly as you can until you really can't clasp it anymore. And then I'll usually just go through and pull it all again just to get it as taut as possible. And that's pretty good. Like if you can kind of drum on it and it's not going to move too much, then my personal opinion is that it's pretty successful. Okay, now you're ready to start. You know, that's the first step. So the next step is to actually thread your needle. I was not willing to do that on camera because it can take me an awfully long time to thread a needle. So I did not want you guys to witness that. But I will show you kind of how to get ready to do that. So DMC thread, when it comes in these like skeins. And each of these little parts is actually 6 smaller threads that are sort of swirled together. But when you are stitching, you never want to use 6 threads at a time. Usually you're going to want to use 1 or 2. If you use 2, that is going to make a much fuller look to whatever it is that you're cross stitching. But it can make it a little bit of tricky because like your if you think about like your squares, every square has the 4 little holes on each corner. And the holes that touch other squares, you're going to go through those ones multiple times, square to square to square. And so you might go through one little hole on the Aida fabric 4 times. So if you use 2 threads, by the end of that, by the 4th time that you're going through that hole, it can actually be really hard to get your needle in and your needle might bend. And that can be really also hard on your fingers, which is why people use thimbles for sewing. Well, also so you don't poke yourself. I take that back. But you could use a thimble on your dominant hand so that, because like when you're trying to push it through, it can actually kind of bruise you, and has done that to me in the past. So be careful of that. If you just use 1 thread, you're way less likely to have that problem, but your cross stitch will look a little bit more sparse. So that's a choice you have to make kind of at the beginning. So what you do is you take one of those, so you'll just kind of go in here to your thread and find the end of it, which I did earlier, so I know it's here. Okay, and you'll just choose some and you'll just like kind of get a big long piece and you'll cut that piece off, and that's 6 threads right there. And then you'll take your 6 and you will just sort of see how, there's actually only 4 here because I already pulled out 2, but you will see, you'll take 2 of the little strands and you'll just sort of pull them off from the other one. So then you have 2 and 2 or 2 and 4 left. And then if you're using 2, if you're using 1, you just pull the 1. And then you will put those 2 strands together through the needle, and that gets you ready to go. So again, that's something I already did. All right. So then you've got your hoop, you've got your like cross here so you know where to start, and you've got your design. And I am going to start right here. So I know that at the intersection of the cross, the very first hole there on the right side is a stitch, and that I then will need to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 stitches in a row to make that part of the mouse's body going over to his paws. So like that row is 16 stitches. So that's how I can start. So what you'll do is you start from the back of your hoop and you put your needle going through this way and you pull it through. So you don't need to knot the bottom of your thread. That's not necessary in cross stitch. So you pull it through, and then it's called cross stitch because you stitch by making crosses. So I've kind of Actually, I don't like where I started. I mean, I'm going to start at the bottom left of that square. So you can see that there. Pull my thread through and then put it back in on the top right. All right, that's 1/2 of my cross. Then, because this is the first stitch of my design, I'm going to pay some attention to the bottom. So you've got the loose end here that you want to make sure that when you pull it through, that loose end isn't coming out. So the way you do that is you make sure that when you're making your next stitch, you catch the loose end in and like stitch over it. And that's going to like pull it really taut and not let the thread go anywhere. So now what I'm going to do is I started from the, oops, oh my gosh. Okay, there we go. I started from the bottom left and then I went to the top right. Now I'm going to start on the bottom right and go to the top left. That's going to make my cross. And what I'm going to do when I do that, first I'm going to try and get my needle through the correct hole. There we go. And what I'm going to do this is what it'll kind of look like from the front. And this is what it's going to look like from the back. And from the back, I'm going to make sure that as that hoop is pulling through, it's going to catch the loose end in it. And I'll pull that taut. And now it's caught the end of the, this is kind of hard to see because it's kind of a lighter color. I meant to choose one that would show really well. But it catches that thread. And then from there, you can't really pull it out anymore. So you're good to go as far as stitching. And then kind of the same deal. I'm going to go through the bottom left. I'm going to pull that through. Let's see. And I actually think I caught all of the back that time. There we go. All right. And then you've got your first cross. So this is very hard to see. Oh my gosh. Like really everything's opposite and it's confusing the heck out of me. And there's how it should look for the design. So, I'm going to go 12 in a row along that row. That'll keep you going. So I don't know, I'll do another one really quickly. You can kind of start to see how it comes together. But from that point on, you're really just making that same stitch over and over, the cross stitch. It's the most famous one for a reason. And, the whole activity is named after it. So, it's hard to go wrong with that particular stitch. And you just do it over and over again. When it comes time to change colors or you run out of thread and you need to put new thread in, you'll basically do that exact same thing where you start and you catch the back of the end of your tail from the back and, you keep going. And when you want to end, let's say you're running out of thread of this thread, then, and you need to do another one, then all you do is you go under, on the back side, the stitches that you've already made, you just put your needle under those stitches and bring it up and chop it. And since it's under the stitches you've already made, the tail end is held tightly in place. So there is no way it can really go anywhere. And if you need to add new colors, you just end the thread you're working on, put your new color in, and just stitch according to the design. There is one other type of stitch. Well, there's actually a few other type of stitches, but the only other one I'll talk about is the back stitch. So this particular mouse design does not include any back stitches. You can see it is all these X's. The other design that I'm working on does include back stitches. And this design, I think I showed it to you earlier so you could see the colors and the DMC numbers. But you'll see right here, back stitches, and there's a certain symbol for it and a color for it. And on the actual design, this is the design I've been working on. So you need to do a back stitch when you see that thick black line, like in the cloud. That's all back stitches. And to do a back stitch, you're basically just going vertically or horizontally, hole to hole. And so basically, let's see if I can do this backwards so you can actually see it. You'll go in and you'll make a stitch. And then you will go into the hole directly below that stitch. And then from the back of it, you'll go 2 holes up like that. And then you'll go into 1 hole below that. And so on, so that you're making that stitch. So it's basically you're literally going back. So you go from the back, you go 1 hole up, and then 1 hole back, and then 2 holes up, and then 1 hole back, and then 2 holes up, and then 1 hole back, and so on. That's a back stitch. So there are tutorials online written out for how to do all of these stitches. There are other videos on YouTube and lots of different websites, so you can kind of take a peek if you would like. And that is the basics of how to do a really simple cross stitch pattern. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to comment and ask. And it has been a pleasure showing you, and certainly a pleasure actually doing it. It's something I really enjoy, and I hope that you'll enjoy as well. So thank you, and I hope you guys are all staying sane, staying safe, mostly staying inside, and I really hope to see you at the library again soon when we reopen. We're not sure when that will be yet, but when we do, I'm really looking forward to seeing everybody. So thanks, and have a really great rest of your days.